Hi everyone, good morning. Happy Friday to you guys. I'm here with my cousin George. He's over here visiting today. And Georgie is part of the Serafins that went to Puerto Rico. That's another story. Which I guess we can tell them how that whole thing went down, right?
Yeah, well, it was more of a runaway than anything.
Well, yeah, it was after the Castro Revolution. Part of the family settled in Puerto Rico, his grandfather, his uncles, and everything. But then if we go back a few centuries or generations before that, my great-grandfather, not this guy, but this guy's dad, so Antonio, my great-grandfather brought George's great-great-grandfather to Cuba from the Canary Islands in Spain.
And my great-grandfather, because he was
Yes.
born already. He was around 9 to 11 years old.
And I had the pleasure and privilege of meeting Papito. We used to play dominoes together. At that time, he was already the oldest of the Serafins. Because that was back in the 90s, and he was already well into his 90s, almost 100. How old was Papito when he died?
92.
I was going to say, I thought he was a little bit further out.
He's 92, 93. On the cusp of that.
He had a great life. So, this, well, he worked his ass off. As a matter of fact, believe it or not, the legend in the family was that he was the hardest working of all the Serafins. The story is, I don't know if you know this, that Papito Serafin, his grandfather, great-grandfather, right?
Great-grandfather.
Great-grandfather, would knock down, I don't know if it was 20 posts a day of wood. 20 poste.
Sounds about right.
Now, we're talking about, when you say posts, it's like those electric posts,
Yeah.
which are made out of timbers. This fucking guy, excuse my French, would knock those down on his own. Like all day, he'd start chopping away until he was done. So he grew up in the country. He grew up in a little place in Cuba called Nazareno. Las Cejas. And I went there.
Oh, nice.
I went there. My grandfather took me there. And Papito's sister was still alive. That was in Netina. You ever heard that story? In Netina Serafin? She was still alive. And I don't know if you know this part of the story too. So, Papito Serafin and in Netina, she married in Netina. Okay, so Papito's sister married her cousin Chicho Serafin.
Yes.
So we
That
have
I did hear.
a whole bunch of cousins in that region that are Serafin.
Serafin.
So the last name is twice in Spanish, especially. Yeah. And I got to meet them. There was one René Serafin, and René became a teacher, and Armando knew him because his uncle Armando.
Yeah, a lot of our families either teachers or nurses, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh, yeah, we got everything in the family. Except Dad used to say, well, I'm not going to say it here on this thing, but, in Spanish, no tenemos, like...
Well,
yeah.
That's a story
right.
that I found out, that we had one aunt...
Oh, hold on. Commercial endorsement. I'm going to smoke Don Ramon 1917 right now. Just wanted to say that. Go ahead.
We have one aunt that ran a burlesque.
That does not surprise me, George. That does not surprise me.
She ran a burlesque. It's actually one of my mom's aunts. She ran a burlesque. She passed away recently.
Wow. Oh shit! In Cuba, right?
No, here. She was here in Florida.
Because I did hear about a Serafin that had
Here's the thing.
a bar.
Her son wasn't her biological son. Her son belonged to one of her girls.
Wow.
He didn't find out till much later.
Georgie, isn't that a song?
I think so.
Maria Teresa y Danilo and all that shit?
No, but that actually happened in the Serafin family.
Everything happens in Serafin.
No, no. We could sell one story after another to Telemundo and make a crap ton of money.
Georgie used to come here when Dad was alive, which I still say he's somewhere around here. His spirit, anyway. And they would talk for hours, and he would tell them all these funny stories. My dad would tell them all these funny stories. And you know, these stories are priceless because you know, they got to get carried down. You know what I mean? And like I do these videos for many reasons. Number one, it's great advertising.
Yeah, perfect advertising.
Number two, I think it's really entertaining, and I know you guys enjoy them. So, as long as I always say, as long as you guys keep enjoying them, I'll keep making them, and I'll keep having fun doing it. But the other reason too is historical preservation.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody's gonna watch these someday and say, "Oh yeah, wow, look at that!" You know, my son, hopefully,
Yeah.
your kids, if you ever have any at some point, you're working on it every day.
I'm working on it, yeah.
But
Trying to get the Serafin out.
Jesus Christ, man, the stories. I was just telling him before we went on camera that, well, we had several of members of the family that were involved originally. You know, they were revolutionaries and they were involved in the whole Castro thing in the early days. Then they turned on the government, and then some of them, you know, they got executed later, which is very sad. There was another one. I think it was Felipe Serafin. I got to tell you about him later. He got blown up. He got blown up by the Castro guys in Paris.
Yep, you told me.
But he took out a few communists before he got killed anyway. But that was many years ago. But anyway, when Carlito, which is another cousin of ours, when he got incarcerated, one of Castro's guys went up to him and said, "Listen, man," he goes, "What is it with you guys? You guys are formando lío. You know, you guys are always in trouble. You guys are revolutionaries, and God, you guys are a pain in the ass, you know." But that's just the way I guess our family is. They'll fight tooth and nail to the end.
Yeah. Speaking of getting into trouble, well, running from trouble.
What, you're getting incarcerated?
No. No, going back to how my parents got to, our Serafins got to Puerto Rico.
Oh yeah, go ahead. Very good story.
My grandfather and grandmother lived in Cuba, in Havana.
Right.
And they decided to leave, right? So they did it in steps. My grandfather went first. He went out to Spain, ironically with a passport that said Master Baker on it.
Oh wow.
So he was able to leave and go to Spain and get a job as a baker. And once he had enough money, he went ahead and pulled my mom, my uncle, and my grandmother to Spain. They left literally out of one of the last legal flights to the Spain.
We're talking about Papito did this?
No, Humberto. And then
I thought Eugenio had come out.
Eugenio went straight to New York.
Right, he was in Jersey.
Yeah, he was in Jersey.
I'll tell you a funny story about that. And I don't want to cut you off.
No,
We're going to
ahead.
resume, but so when Dad got to Jersey, okay, my uncle on my mother's side was a guy named Chucho Serafin. Chucho Rodriguez, right? I love Chucho to death. He was a big Yankee fan, made me a Yankee fan by default. We would go to the games.
There's still a contention between you and I, but let's go ahead.
Anyway, he was a great man, right? So my dad and Chucho, they really didn't know each other because Chucho had been here since the 50s. He marries my aunt in Cuba, takes her from Cuba to New Jersey in the 50s. So he had just heard of Chucho. They had never met.
Yeah.
But my God, Chucho was so good to my family and my parents especially. God rest his soul. But when my parents came to New Jersey, they started talking, and of course my dad and him became great friends. And because they were brother-in-laws, right? And he said, "Oh, by the way, there's a guy who's a friend of mine who's a Serafin, and he's nothing of yours. He's no family. He's not related to you." And my dad said to him, "Listen, if he's Cuban or Canary Islander, he's a family member. There's no doubt about it." He said, "What's this guy's name?" He says, "Eugenio Serafin." So, but the thing is, Eugenio had already been in Jersey, lived there, and had already gone to Puerto Rico, I think, at that point.
Yeah.
So what happened was they stayed in touch, and on one of the trips that Eugenio went back to New Jersey, he calls Chucho, and then they met, and then that's when my dad met Eugenio for the first time. And he said, "Oh yeah, you're Papito's son. Oh my God, I'm so and so." So they, they hit it off at that point.
Yeah,
what a story that was.
That is.
But anyway, go ahead with your story. I'm sorry.
There's also other stories. I don't have many because it's hard to remember them all from my mom.
I'll take care of that.
One of the stories was my mom drove down to Key West to pick up somebody.
Okay.
And they didn't know they had some sort of weapon in the car.
Oh shit!
I think it was like a hunting rifle in the trunk. I think that's how the story went. But yeah, she drove down to Key West with an aunt to go pick up somebody. Can't remember who it was. That was my mom's first traumatic experience driving over the 7 Mile Bridge. To this day, she still has problems going over bridges.
For those of you guys that have never gone, that's the bridge that connects Marathon with Key West.
Yeah.
And it's 7 miles, but it's the overseas highway, and it's just the most beautiful view.
Oh, it's gorgeous.
It's gorgeous. But
if you're
it'll put
frightened-
your, like you say in Spanish, it'll put your balls here. You know what I mean? It's ocean everywhere, and it's high, and people drive like maniacs, and those 7 miles feel like they're forever and ever and ever.
The Serafin clan that ended up in Puerto Rico all became
Very successful.
very successful.
Very successful. Your cousin Denise became Miss Puerto Rico,
Miss Puerto Rico,
1993, I think.
93.
Beautiful,
She was
beautiful
in a magazine cover. My mom did an art.
I mean, she is gorgeous,
A pencil
yeah.
arting of her.
She's a doctor today.
She's a doctor today.
Yeah.
Married to a doctor
Wow.
who is by far one of the best oncologists in
Wow.
the country.
That's wild. But you know, his grandparents, his uncles, they all did very well in Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
They were in the hardware business for many years before Home Depot even existed in the island.
Oh, yeah, one of the largest distributors of hardware supplies in the entire Caribbean.
Yeah, they were in the San Juan metro area.
No,
Bayamón.
Bayamón, yeah.
They weren't technically still San
Yeah.
Juan Bayamón, yeah. Metro area. But you know, I bumped into people all over the island. And I've said, they've said to me, oh, you're Serafin, yeah. Oh, you know the Serafin wholesale? Like, oh, yeah, you know,
Yeah.
my relatives. Oh, no shit. And we also have a part of the family, believe it or not, of the Serafins that went to Venezuela.
Yes, I heard about that.
And I'm in touch with one of them, David Peña Serafin. He is actually in Miami now. He decided to come because Venezuela is another political nightmare. So this poor guy went from Venezuela back to Spain. They gave him his Spanish citizenship.
Oh, yeah.
Because technically we can apply for it and we get it because of our background.
Yeah.
Because, you know, like Dad even lived in Spain.
Yeah. So, yeah, we tried that, but we couldn't find anything on Papito.
Because what happened, so Dad explained that to me too.
Yeah, that's a crazy story.
In Cuba back in the day, if you had a little bit of money and connections, even though you were born, it's because there was always that connection, Spain and Cuba. I like to say, like, even General Franco said, what do you do if you have a daughter? Unfortunately, this is a terrible story, but it's what do you have a daughter if she's a whore? In Spanish they say puta. You don't turn in Spanish they go, you don't turn your back on your daughter just because she's a whore. So that's the Spain-Cuba relationship. For 100 years they decided to become free from Spain, but they never really were because Spain and Cuba have always been really tight.
Yeah.
So anyway, so the story I think from your great grandfather that Dad told me was, even though he was born in the Canary Islands, he came at such a young age that they basically
They never registered him.
Well, they made a fake birth certificate in Cuba because they had a judge that they knew.
Yeah.
And they said, listen, and there were so many Canary Islanders, Canario, all over the island that had the same problem. So they're like, oh, just make a birth certificate. So they got a paper. They said, okay, he was born tal día, and I think in Placeta. Boom, here it is.
And the story of why they didn't have that paperwork was...
But he could have been born at home in Spain and with a midwife.
The idea is, back at that time, a lot of the younger kids weren't registered, not knowing if they were going to live as long.
That's true.
Because we're talking about early 1900s. Abuela Papito was born in 1909.
Was he born 1900 or 1800?
No, 1908.
Okay.
1908, because
Okay.
he died in 2002.
Okay.
1908.
I knew he was born either like late 1800 or early 1900s, but I didn't.
So, yeah, he was early 1900s.
We'll add a picture so you guys can see.
And he, at that age, they usually waited to the ages of 8 or 9 before they registered them.
Yeah.
Because they didn't know.
Yeah, even here in the
Yeah.
States, it was the same thing.
Yeah, because that's at the time when we didn't have penicillin yet.
Right,
So
right.
a
Crazy
lot of
times.
people died from all sorts of stuff.
Oh, sure. But now the thing with them, even especially remember they would come on boats from Spain, and most of these people were born in homes with midwives, and then they would, even in Spain, they would just register them later
Yep.
if they did it at all. Because I know, like, I've heard stories of people here in the States that have said to me, "Oh yeah, well I went to get into the army and they wouldn't take me because I didn't have a birth certificate." And I said, "What do you mean?" Well, I didn't get registered because people from all these other states, and they would just register them.
My favorite story my mom would tell me was a story that my great grandmother used to tell her about having so many kids. That she would be working out in
Oh my
the
God,
fields.
she works.
Dora
Yes.
used to be working
What
out
a
in the
nice
field.
lady she was. I met her too.
And my mom said,
Very-
I would
very
be
nice
working out in the field and out it popped out another
my God,
one. She'd
another
cut the cord, keep working.
How many did she, like 6 or 7?
10.
10 kids. Holy shit.
I was Eugenio, Humberto, who's the oldest,
Amazing.
Pancho, Celita,
Armando.
I can't remember them all. Yeah, there was 10 of them. She had 10 kids.
Did Dad ever tell you that poem that he did about the Serafins?
No.
Que los había rubios y trigueños y
I wouldn't
mi
do
apellido Serafin. It just that poor lady.
No offense
Oh
to
my goodness.
Abuela Dora. She wasn't the brightest bulb on the tree.
Such a nice lady.
But she was super sweet.
Very nice
She
lady.
was very tough to deal with Papito and his shenanigans.
Oh my God, can you imagine?
because
Ooh,
That
those
was
Serafins are tough, man.
my favorite story about Papito was the fact that they tried to teach him how to speak and read English, and every teacher he got ended up between his legs.
Let's just put this out there. Always had a freaking cigar in his mouth. Always.
Always, yeah. The man would boil his pork in the morning, put it to simmer, to soften it up.
Do you remember when they used to put they used to assemble these little things at home? Like they had a little, one of those little mail order jobs that they would.
Yes.
Do you remember that?
Yeah. I actually helped him with he would assemble the tracks of the
windows,
blinds.
right?
Yeah.
And they were like 90 years old, and they were still at home, him and his wife, putting together these little things.
Yeah, they would plug in the teeth that held the blades.
It's
on
crazy.
the whole track. Yeah.
Let me tell you this part of the story. Okay, so his great grandfather, again, Papito, we went down to Miami, and when I was down there, I said, man, just for the hell of it, I went to the phone book, and I see Francisco Serafin, Papito, right? I said, Dad, look, Francisco Serafin, he says, in Hialeah, he said, Francisco Serafin, he says, damn, that's my dad's cousin, Papito. He goes, there's no way that he's still alive. I go, I don't know, let's go by there and find out. This was back in early.
Yeah, when the
early
phone
90s.
book was
When the phone book
easily.
existed. So we went to the little apartment in Hialeah, and we knocked on the door, and here comes out his great grandfather Papito, little old man, strong though still. And we start talking. He had a freaking memory. He did not forget anything.
That man never lost his mind.
And I think the story, you correct me if I'm wrong here, okay? He went to Miami because he did not want to be a burden on his kids. So he basically made his kids move him to Miami, to this little apartment, to be by himself with his wife, with his great grandmother, just so he wouldn't be in anybody's hair. Because I used to say to him, well, don't you like it in Puerto Rico? Yeah, I like it in Puerto Rico, but everybody's too busy and everybody's working. And over here, I do whatever the hell I want. I go play dominoes.
Exactly.
I smoke cigars because they had the domino park, remember?
Yeah, the domino
Jose
park.
Marti.
Yeah.
And that's our family. That's the way that we are.
I played
very
dominoes with him
independent.
at that park. I played dominoes with him at that park. And like I said, every time we visit Miami, we go see him. There'd be a pot of pork boiling on the stove, simmering on the stove. He's outside smoking a cigar.
Another thing the Serafins love, their pork and their chicharrones and all that.
And at the time, I didn't know the size of the cigars, but he smoked the thickest.
A Churchill, usually. You know why I know?
But
He would give me the boxes. He would save the boxes for me. Somewhere at home I have a box.
Also, those cigars look like this.
Because you know what it was? Eugenio would buy the boxes for him. And he would send them to him. And he would send him boxes of Peñamils from the Canary Islands, Cohibas that Armando would get for him. And then, of course, we got in contact with them again, and we started playing dominoes. And Celita would come over the house. It was great. Great times.
Oh, yeah. No.
Great times.
And like I said.
That's going back 30 years already, Jesus.
Yeah, it's been a while.
And then one day, Georgie happened to find us here in Tarpon Springs.
Through my sister.
No shit.
My sister was the one who found you. My half sister, on my dad's side, she came to the Sponge Docks here in Tarpon to vacation.
Another great story.
Another great story. She comes in, she starts looking around because she sees the name Serafin, and she knows that that's my mom's maiden name.
I think she walked in and talked to Dad, right?
Yeah. She was talking to Dad, and then she's looking at the pictures on the wall, and she sees Papito, who she knows.
Yeah, he's on the wall. Everybody's on the wall.
She knows, and she's like, "Holy crap, that's my stepmom's granddad."
Unbelievable.
And then she told us. I came up here.
Yeah, because you guys were technically in Bradenton, right?
Yeah, we were in Bradenton still at the time.
Right down the road.
And we came up, and that's history. That right there is our history.
That's our history. A long one it is.
Yeah.
And here's our great grandfather. Well, your great uncle. We're just talking about going back 7 generations.
7 generations.
Yeah, but we don't have pictures of 6 and 7 because photography was in its infancy.
Yeah, it was in late 1800s.
But it's weird because if you look at stuff from America, from the U.S., there are Civil War pictures, 1860s, but I guess that technology didn't make it to Cuba or Spain.
Yeah. Well, when you're talking about smaller provinces like the islands and stuff, a lot of the technology was still far behind.
Right. They didn't get that till after the Spanish-American War.
Technology was always around where there were more people, because of more people. Like everything goes today.
And those were
if it
those
doesn't make
cameras,
money,
remember?
if it doesn't make money, we don't take it there.
But it was I remember somebody brought it in here one day and showed it to me. It was like a box, and it was you go in there, and then the picture would be like a foil. You know what I'm talking about?
Yep.
Como de metal.
Yep.
And that's how it would do the imprint. Yeah. Wow.
It would take longer because of
amazing.
Because the exposure time was longer. The film wasn't as pronounced as it the film became in the 35 millimeter era.
Isn't that incredible?
Where it was much more sensitive.
I mean, to think that in the 1860s they could produce something like that, that's just
It was pretty crazy, yeah.
My God, for its time, it's so advanced.
It was. And the thing with technology has always been that exponential rate.
But Georgie is a living testament here that our family history has been a journey of Spain to Cuba to Florida to Puerto Rico. It's like it's been in the same for the last 100 years. It's been in this whole area,
region,
right? I mean, that's basically it.
And I'm one of those.
Oh, and Venezuela, because like I was just telling him a minute ago, we have relatives that went from from Spain to Venezuela, from the Canary Islands to Venezuela, which was also a very, very big Canary Islander landing area.
Yeah.
Venezuela. Yeah.
The history of especially Tampa, Ybor.
Oh yeah, Tampa, Ybor.
All that. If any of you ever make it down here, you live in the area, go to the Ybor Museum. It's impressive.
Awesome. And we're proud that we're making Mr. Ybor cigar, which we have here. Let's go ahead and do that little commercial endorsement here. El Príncipe de Gales, aka Prince of Wales. I know you guys have seen it in the videos before. That was Mr. Ybor's brand, his pride and joy. And his great-grandson, Rafael, gave me the blessing to continue to make the brand. And he's still alive at the age of 93. So I'm blessed, I'm honored to continue the family.
There's something in these tobaccos, I'm telling you.
I mean, wow, the Serafins have come a long way. Not only are we making our cigars, but we're making the Ybor family cigars now too.
There could be something to it, because my grandfather stopped smoking them, and he passed away.
Hey, I'll tell you what.
Great-grandfather never stopped, and he died in 92.
Dad used to tell me, I mean, Dad had a little bit of an issue with his heart towards the end, of course, and he was only 77. But if it wouldn't have been because of that, there's no question he would have been around a long time. Because they do. These Serafins, man, they last forever. Like, they're all...
Mala hierba nunca muere.
That's right, that's right. That means bad weed does not die. But in English, doesn't translate as good. But, yeah, that's basically it. They were cigar-smoking country people, right? Campesinos. And they worked their asses off. Like hard labor. They developed, I mean, they worked in tobacco, most of them, in Papito's, his area there, Las Cejas, Nazareno. That's where my grandfather was born too.
Even the ladies of our great grandmothers, Dora worked in the cotton, the cane fields.
In the cane fields. Well, yeah. I mean, that was the big work. I mean, like Grandpa worked in cane, like at the Central, the sugar refinery, for many, many years, and then he also had his little cigar factory. But those were the two big key industries in Cuba and in Puerto Rico. And going back, guys, to the Canary Islands. Because the Canary Islanders, like I've said in other videos, were the ones that developed those industries in Cuba, in Puerto Rico, and even in Venezuela.
And then they brought the factories here to Tampa and Ybor.
Did you know that there's a town in Louisiana, and it's called Marrero. In English, they say Marrero. Well, Marrero is named after a guy named Joe Marrero, who was the first senator from Louisiana, who you could actually say was a Spaniard, the son of Spaniards, Canary Islanders. Because a lot of Canary Islanders also settled in Louisiana.
Look at that.
Well, and a lot of people don't know this. I saw this on the news the other day. Everybody always says, oh, the French Quarter this, the French Quarter that. Listen, the French Quarter was actually developed by the Spaniards.
Yep.
Because when the Spaniards went into Louisiana, to New Orleans, they're the ones that made the streets, and they made it look the way it looks now.
Exactly.
That's why, like you said, Ybor and New Orleans look so much alike.
Yep. And the history, like I said, going back to the museum over there at Ybor, you got the history tells the story of Ybor set up the city, set up the town.
He sure did. Company town.
And as Henry Plant was building the hotel for the rich and
the railroad.
And the rich came down for their vacation, started seeing that Mr. Ybor was making money, paying people less with all the immigrants that were coming in from Argentina, Venezuela,
Cuba,
Ireland. I mean,
they were coming in from everywhere.
Every country had a group, had a section of Tampa Bay was theirs. And
the Tampa Bay Hotel.
And the Tampa Bay Hotel, that was that is now the very famous University of Tampa.
Right. There's a room there that's got a placard outside, and it said this room was where Jose Marti came, and he talked to Mr. Plant even about the freedom of Cuba and what they were trying to do and stuff. So
that's where Theodore Roosevelt and his Rough Riders stayed before they shipped out.
That's right.
In the Henry Plant steamboats to get down there to help liberate Cuba.
You're a very knowledgeable guy, this guy. I gotta say, proud to have him in the family. But no, truthfully, it's a bastion of history here in this area. And if you like, like you said, the history, like with Cuba and the Spanish-American War, I mean, it started here. This was the place.
Yep, this is where they were sent off to liberate the Cuban with troops on horseback and all sorts of
Oh,
stuff.
listen, there's a guy, his name was Oreste Ferrara, Italian guy, right?
Mhm.
So this guy, I can envision this, right? He got the newspaper, he's from Naples, and he gets the newspaper in Naples one day, and he reads about these peasant, fighters, the Mambis in Cuba, and how they're fighting the Spaniards. He found this to be so fascinating and so cultivating that he actually came to Tampa to sign up and to go fight in the war. And he came from a very wealthy family in Naples, Italy.
Mm-hmm.
Well, anyway, he became a colonel in the army in Cuba. But the story is he met a really pretty Cuban girl here in Tampa, and he said to her, back then, this is I guess the way it was, right? He was courting her and stuff.
Mhm.
And back then it's like, oh, if you're gonna court my daughter, now you gotta marry her. That's the way that it was, right? So he said to the girl and to the family, listen, I'm gonna come and I'm gonna marry you, but first I gotta go free Cuba. When I free Cuba, then I'm gonna come back. Dude, he did it.
He did it.
He went there. He became a colonel in the army. Then he became a diplomat during the Republican years, in the early Cuban years. But he came back to Tampa, married the lady, and they had a beautiful life. And there's a placard in Ybor that says Oreste Ferrara and his squad were here in this corner, in Ybor City.
Yeah, there's a lot of crazy history in Florida that's just hidden away, and you got to go looking for it.
Yeah, it's there.
It's there.
If you're a history guy, they say that if you don't really respect history, then you're bound to
Repeat it.
repeat it, and I agree.
My favorite quote that I've come up with is, "It's hard to know where you're going if you don't know where you've been."
You're right. I always tell my kids history is very important. But anyway, with that being said, I don't want to bore you guys to death here with these stories. Is there anything else you want to add?
No, I'm good.
I think this was a pretty good video, actually, to make it on the fly like this. Just Georgie
Just-
happened to come here to visit on a Friday. And I'm like,
Yeah,
let's
it's
do a
coming
freaking
up.
video.
Always like to visit family.
The worst part is Dad's not here in the video. We should have done this back then, but we didn't. You always think about these things after.
No, he's here.
Yeah, he is.
He's always here.
He's always here. Keeping a watchful eye over the place. Anyway, guys, have a great weekend. Thanks for watching. Stay smoky. Till next time.